Hello, welcome to Introduction to Budapest. This is the first companion video to our website, babanellasworld.com. This website is a travel blog based on places we've been over the past several years. So far there are 26 different locations shown on the website, mostly European. The website and the videos star my wife Nella and me, and maybe other family members will show up at times, but we'll introduce them when they do. The videos and the website probably have more background material than most travel blogs you're likely to see. This is so you'll have a better understanding of what you're looking at and hopefully make them more interesting to you. The videos and the website will be old information by the time you see them, but that's true of all of these things you see on the internet. But we'll give you the dates of the trips shown and also the times that the video was created. So on to Budapest. Budapest is the capital and largest city of the country of Hungary. Hungary is a country of somewhat less than 10 million people, so it's not that big. It's located in East Central Europe, and it's landlocked and has borders with 7 other countries. During the Cold War, Hungary was a Warsaw Pact country, which put it on the wrong side of the Iron Curtain. 6 of its 7 neighbors were also Warsaw Pact countries, though some of them weren't even countries at the time. For instance, 3 of them were part of Yugoslavia. In 1956, disillusioned with their socialist paradise, the Hungarians staged a revolution against their communist government. The revolution was briefly successful, but it didn't take long before Soviet tanks moved in and crushed their ambitions. But there was a brief period of an open border with Austria, during which nearly 250,000 Hungarians fled to the west before the border was closed again. Eventually, in 1989, with the Warsaw Pact crumbling, Hungary became a parliamentary republic. It's been a member of NATO since 1999 and of the European Union since 2004. It does not mean that it shares its currency with anybody else. In Hungary, they use something called a forint. At the time this video was made in 2018, there were about 280 forints to a US dollar, which means this 10,000 forint note would be worth about $35. The city of Budapest has about 1.7 million people, which makes it the largest in the country, as we said earlier. It's cut into 2 pieces by the Danube River, which flows southward through the city, eventually ending up in the Black Sea. The 2 pieces of the city have names. The western side is called Buda, and the eastern side is called Pest. These are not cute nicknames somebody came up with, but these were 2 separate cities that existed on either side of the Danube before they were combined, which didn't happen until 1873. They may or may not have considered the name Pest Buda, but I think Budapest is probably the right call. The first permanent connection between Buda and Pest was and is called the Chain Bridge, which wasn't built until 1849. Before that, if you wanted to get across, you would probably have to take a boat or a ferry if they had them operating. I'm not sure about that. But if you wanted to just get a message across, you could probably just yell, because the river is only 1,800 feet across at this point. Any yelling would probably have been in the local language, which is Hungarian. Hungarian is a difficult language for Europeans and Americans to learn. It's not a member of any of the usual language groups known to Westerners. It's not a Romance language like Spanish or French or Italian. It's not a Germanic language like German or Dutch or Danish or English. It's not even a Slavic language like Russian or Czech or Polish. It's considered to be a Uralic language. The roots of Uralic languages are to the east of Moscow in present-day Russia, in the area between the Volga River and the Ural Mountains. The Urals are where Europe ends and Asia begins, so Uralic languages will be considered European, but barely. The only other Uralic languages in Western Europe are Finnish and Estonian. So if you happen to know either of those languages, you might have a leg up if you're traveling to Hungary. The ancestors of the present-day Hungarians were a group of tribes collectively known as Magyars. The Magyars first came over from their Near Asia homeland late in the 9th century AD. In Hungarian, the present-day name of the country comes from these tribes. It's pronounced
Magyarország,
like that. The early Magyars were ill-mannered, launching mostly successful incursions into Western Europe that went as far as present-day Denmark and even Spain. A defeat in 955 at the hands of a Frankish army slowed them down somewhat. But they didn't really clean up their act until 970, when the Grand Prince of the Hungarians, a man named Giza, made peace with the Holy Roman Empire and even had himself baptized as a Christian. But Giza wasn't much of a Christian as it turned out. He continued his former pagan practices, and he consolidated his power through what's been called extreme cruelty. Giza could see the handwriting on the wall, though. He treated visiting Christians well, and he encouraged the baptism of many Hungarians. Giza was succeeded by his son Stephen, called István in Hungarian, who was a much more devout Christian. Stephen was able to get recognition from Pope Sylvester II as being the first king of Hungary, Stephen I. He was crowned sometime around Christmas of the year 1000. Stephen was eventually canonized in 1083, becoming Hungary's first saint. Over the next several centuries, Hungary was in a lot of wars and spent a lot of time being controlled by either Austrians or Turks. In the 19th century, Hungary entered into the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. This resulted in a generally prosperous period of modernization and economic development. But it also led to the eventual entry of the country into World War I on the same side as Austria, which became the losing side. The settlement of the war under the Treaty of Trianon included the loss of a vast amount of Hungarian territory. Next, World War II came along. A desire to recover their lost territory, plus a dislike of communism and a dash of anti-Semitism, then led to Hungary's entry into World War II on the same side as the Germans, again the eventual losing side. During the war, despite the anti-Semitism in Hungary, the country never really bought into the Holocaust thing the Nazis were up to. And they did what they could to resist the deportations of Jews that Germany was requesting. Germany eventually lost patience and installed a puppet government in 1944. The new government was a lot more cooperative and soon had deported hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews, largely to Auschwitz. The deportations ended when the country was overrun by the Soviet Red Army. This was good news and bad news for the Hungarians when they discovered that Joseph Stalin wasn't really their friend either. Hungary was treated by the Soviets as a defeated territory and a population to be exploited. Borders were closed and thousands of Hungarians were executed or exported to be used as slave labor. And there was zero tolerance for anything like resistance. A brutal secret police organization called the AVH was established to keep things under control. 4 decades of Soviet domination, interrupted by the '56 revolution, eventually ended as we talked about earlier. Jumping ahead to 2014, Nella and I wanted to get to this new free market Budapest from the west coast of the United States. This turned out to be easier said than done, as direct flights didn't seem to exist. So we got something that was split into 3 pieces. Our first flight to JFK Airport in New York left at 6 a.m., and of course we had to wake up well before that. After getting to the airport, getting checked in, and going through security, we got on the plane and flew to JFK. There was a fairly long layover at JFK, but eventually we boarded a Brussels Airlines flight to Brussels, Belgium. We arrived there around 7:30 a.m. Brussels time. To us, this felt like 10:30 p.m. after an already long day, but it was breakfast time in Brussels, so we got breakfast. We had some time before our next flight, so we looked around at the Brussels airport a little bit, and we found a display of some legendary Belgian chocolate. The brands on display were things like Godiva, Newhouse, and Cornet Port Royal. We didn't buy any for some reason, but it did look nice. Instead, we continued on to the gate for our next flight, which was another Brussels Airlines plane, a smaller one this time, that would take us the rest of the way to Budapest, which is another couple of hours. And toward the end of the flight, we had a nice view of the Danube, both crossing the Hungarian countryside and cutting through the middle of Budapest. We landed, went through immigration and customs, then we found an ATM and loaded up on forints, because we weren't too sure how commonly credit cards would be accepted. It turned out to be pretty common. And from the airport, we caught a taxi to our hotel, the Le Méridien Budapest. This is a nicer hotel than we can usually afford, but prices for things in Budapest are mostly lower than in other major European cities. At this point, our bodies were screaming at us for the abuse we'd inflicted on them, and were insisting that we lie down and go to sleep for the next 5 days. But we did not. Previous trips had taught us that jet lag is best shortened by acclimating ourselves as quickly as possible. This means going out and doing stuff during daylight hours and trying really hard to sleep when it's dark outside. It also means eating meals at the correct local hours. As it was about 2 p.m. in Budapest, we went out to find some lunch. We headed south and found a promising restaurant near the Elizabeth Bridge. We'll discuss bridges in a future video. The restaurant was interesting. It had plants growing out of its walls. And the food turned out to be much better than airport food, which is admittedly a low bar. I got some chicken thing, and Nella got a local specialty goulash soup. Goulash is mainly meat, vegetables, and paprika, and is probably Hungary's most well-known food item. The soup version turned out to be quite good. I had a taste too. With our hunger pangs satisfied, our body's other demands couldn't be ignored, so we returned to the hotel and took a nap. We woke up a few hours later and found it was dark outside and figured we should get dinner before the restaurants closed. This time we headed north and found food, again goulash was included, and found that now that it was approaching bedtime we were no longer sleepy. So we decided to wander around Budapest for a little while and kill some time and maybe tire ourselves out a little bit. We started at the big church we found near the restaurant. Despite its neon, this is not the Divino Basilica. This is St. Istvan's Basilica, which is dedicated to Hungary's first saint and first king, Stephen I. And we'll have more on this building in a future video. St. Istvan's was closed for the night, so we headed toward the Danube looking for touristy stuff. And we found some. When we reached the river, not only was there touristy stuff, but nicely lit touristy stuff. A short distance downstream, we could see the chain bridge, and on the other side of the river, a palace called Buda Castle. These landmarks might look familiar to fans of Katy Perry. Nighttime Budapest figures prominently in the video for her Fireworks song. Buda Castle will be featured in a future, less musical video of ours. Upstream from the bridge and castle was a brightly lit church called the Matthias Church, also appearing in a future video. We were getting the feeling that the Buda side of the river was a lot hillier than the Pest side, which seemed pretty flat. We wanted a closer look at the Buda side, so we headed for the chain bridge. The chain bridge is open to both auto and pedestrian traffic. We crossed the bridge, noticing that there were stone lions guarding it at both ends. From Buda, there is a nice view of the chain bridge from a different angle, and there was also the entrance to a tunnel that seemed to pass straight through the hill under Buda Castle. And looking back across the river to the Pest side and upstream, we could see the iconic Hungarian Parliament building on the riverbank.
That's the Pest side of the Danube. That's the Houses of Parliament.
We walked upstream to get a better view of the Parliament building, which will be covered in a future video, and found a nice spot. Looking above the building, we saw a large swarm of flying creatures above the dome. At first we thought they might be bats. After all, Transylvania isn't that far away, over in Romania. But looking closer, we decided they were some kind of bird. Next we returned to the chain bridge and crossed back to Pest. At the Pest Inn, we noticed a large building and wondered what it was. Later on, we found out that it was called the Gresham Palace. The building was built in 1906 by the Gresham Life Assurance Company of London as an office building and a residence. For a while after World War II, it was occupied by the Red Army, who used it as a barracks. They were not nice to the building, and when they left, it was in pretty bad shape. Even so, it was used for a while as a low-rent apartment building. In 1998, some investors saw potential in it and purchased the building. They renovated it extensively and opened it as a luxury hotel in 2004. It's now part of the Four Seasons chain. We were getting tired by this time, so we headed back toward the hotel. Approaching the hotel, we passed through a small park that had a large lit-up Ferris wheel. There seem to be a lot of large Ferris wheels in big cities these days. The most famous is probably the London Eye. This was like that, but smaller, and it was called the Sziget Eye. We returned to our room and slept reasonably well, which is unusual for us for a first night on the other side of the world. Be sure to watch our next video to see what Budapest looks like in the daytime. Or go look at our website, bobandellasworld.com, and read about it there. Thanks for watching, and please add your thumbs or your comments. I will probably respond to comments, as I'm not planning on being overwhelmed by volume. But if you were to prove me wrong on that, I would not complain too much.